Welcome back to the core. We're continuing now in human relations in world missions, working our way through this entire series, beginning with the missionary and his God, then seeing the missionary in the sending church, then the missionary in the body of Christ, and now we're in the exciting section on the missionary in the world. And we started by talking about the governments of the world and what we need to understand. Then I asked the question, are you a revolutionary or a missionary? And we began to discuss the issue between the disciples and Jesus, where they thought Jesus was coming as a revolutionary to do some great work to oust the Romans, but that is not what he was doing. And we need to keep that in mind, that we are still within the realm of the ministry of Jesus. We are an extension of Christ. So until Jesus returns, our mandate is exactly the same. Not to cause a revolution, not to cause political change in a given nation, but as the representations of the euangelion, of the gospel, our job is to go and announce the good news, to tell people that Jesus died for them, was buried and rose again, and compel them to make that confession, believing in their heart, so their names can be written in the Lamb's Book of Life. That's the Great Commission. It has nothing to do with the far-reaching effects of transformation of a government or a place. That might happen, but that's in God's hands, and He will do that possibly through the people in the nations where you are visiting, where you are speaking the gospel and planting seeds. But we are not revolutionaries. We are missionaries. We also talked about civil disobedience on the field and how the midwives disobeyed directly the mandate of Pharaoh by not killing the boys. And that is how Moses came into existence. He was spared because they disobeyed. And there are moments that we will have to disobey the things that a government says, whatever a certain nation's, their laws might be. And I spoke about, as long as it's not a threat, we don't have to disobey anything. Like my status here in Singapore, I can keep doing exactly what God's called me to do. I just have to do it in a very careful manner to make sure that I abide by all the laws. And that's the same in every nation. Unless you're in a place like we talked about Tajikistan and that missionary I told you about that was there distributing Bibles, and how she had to do it like a Cold War spy, and the way that it worked out, because there are ramifications for those people. So God has people and clandestine movements around the world in these nations where civil disobedience is the only way they'll be able to bring the gospel to those people. But as for us, most of us are not called to those nations. So now I want to move to the subject of our traveling. Remember, we already established the Great Commission says, go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. So technically, we only have two things to do as missionaries. Go, preach. Preaching is easy. Open your mouth and talk. Read the Bible to somebody. Tell them about the love of Jesus. Share your testimony. But the hard part is the go, because going means we have to travel to these other lands. It's also, by the way, the most expensive part of missions is the travel, airline tickets and visas and accommodations. And for us to not stay, we go, and that costs money. So we want to be prepared. We want to be the best travelers that we can be. So we turn to our book now, and we're going to see this section called Preparing to Travel to the Nations. When you travel to a foreign country, you need the proper documents to enter and dwell there. The permission of these nations must be acquired before you travel. Even Nehemiah knew this. Remember, we just saw that in our study of Nehemiah and the way he approached the king. Remember the things he itemized on his list of what he needed when the king asked, "What do you need?" He asked for letters to the governors of the prefectures or the provinces in the land so he could cross the Trans-Euphrates regions as he went from nation to nation under the jurisdiction of the king Artaxerxes. But he had to get visas. We have to do the same thing sometime. Depending on your passport, you have different permits to do different things. But so here we see a brief list of necessary documents. The first of which is your passport. As the name implies, this allows you to pass from port to port. Every servant of God should have a passport. This is the minimum. If you feel at all that God is calling you to missions and you want to do anything of this kind of work and you want to obey the Great Commission in any capacity outside of staying home, you need a passport. This is the first level of the test to see if you really want to go to the nations, if you want to do this. In fact, through the years, as I travel to different nations, I preach and teach about missions, and people get excited. They even come up in altar calls, making a commitment like I did when David Hogan preached it in my church. Going to the front, I will go, here am I, send me, I'm going to the nations. And then the first thing I would tell them or ask them was, do you have your passport? Of course, the regions that I was asking that question, I knew they didn't have their passports because most people don't. That's in America. And they don't go to other nations. They don't do these things. So if they don't have a passport, how could they ever leave? They cannot until they get their passport. So the first thing I would tell them was, get your passport. And then at some time later, I might have been itinerating again and coming back through that region, and I would find the same people come up in the altar call again, committing to be missionaries and do the work that God called them to do. They would be excited about it. And when they would come up, I remembered them and I would say, oh, it's you. Hey, did you get your passport yet? And they would say, oh no, I've been meaning to get my passport, and I was kind of looking into it and I haven't gotten it. Well, see, to me, when I see that they were not obedient in the simplest task of getting their passport, then we can't build upon any foundation. I would tell them in the altar calls, well, then you're not going to be a missionary till you get that passport. If you can't take this first step, you be faithful with this one simple thing, then you'll be able to do the other things. Then you'll be able to travel. Then you get your tickets. Then you take care of it. Get your passport, I would tell them. In fact, so much so that Sylvia at the time, Sylvia Lee, who would travel around when I would itinerate, in fact, there was a time she would set up all my meetings in the U.S. Then she moved to the mission field with us. Now she's been working in Cambodia. She's in the U.S., working her way back. But that time, she used to carry around in her briefcase with her, at the altar calls, applications from the U.S. government for passports for Americans. And in the altar call, if people had that commitment, wanted that she would give them an application for the passport and say, here you go. So we would take care of that first thing for them, and they still sometimes wouldn't do it. And often that's the way people are. But you need a passport because it enables you to pass from port to port. It's interesting to note these days that according to certain nations and the way they relate to the nations of the world, different passports allow different access to the world. American passports are high on the list of those passports most valued because they grant you a greater numbers of countries or a greater quantity of ports that you can enter. Other passports, not so. There are some passports from some countries that practically give you access to no other countries. You maybe go to 2 or 3 nations. There are others that are more advantageous. America's a good one, but it's not the best. There's a few ahead of it. One of the most powerful passports on the planet right now is the Singaporean passport. You can go without visa, without restrictions, to practically every single nation on the planet. And it's amazing. If I, by sheer desire to have the advantage of the most powerful passport on the planet, if I wanted that, and it meant more to me than my citizenship to the United States of America, which at this point, of course, doesn't, I would become a Singaporean citizen just for the power of the passport to be able to do the Lord's work. But at this point, everything's okay. Unless, of course, the trend that's happening right now continues, which means the current president of the United States is causing a lot of enemies around the world, and he's causing a lot of problems that are causing countries to restrict American access to their nations. So it's going to make my job a little more difficult, or at least limit how many nations I can go to. So I'm praying that peace come and that everything gets settled and I have that access. But passports are very important. If you don't have your passport, please go get your passport. The next is visas. This document declares the governmental permission to enter and dwell in the foreign nation as issued by that nation. Some of these are very difficult to obtain, and others are very simple. Some of them you can just go online, like literally just go online, pay a small fee, $10, $15, and print it on your printer and fold it up and stick it in your passport, and they take it and register it and staple it or do something and That's it. That's very easy. That's the easiest ones. Some are what they call visa on arrival. And visa on arrival means that you just take your passport. When you get there, they just put a rubber chop in there. In other words, they stamp it with a rubber stamp. And it's the date of entry and then the date of exit. And more countries are doing that. And that's like in my passport, for instance, through the years, before, different nations had different types of visas. Some visas were very big. For instance, Cambodia and Indonesia, two of the most commonly visited countries that I went to, take an entire page of your passport and put a sheet in there and glue it in there and mark it. And so therefore that page can no longer be used. As a result of multiple trips in and out of Indonesia, 15 cities, and in and out of Cambodia, I had passports that were so thick because I had to add pages. They look like little phone books. I'll have to show you those sometime. They're very funny. And I've collected them because they are now 2 or 3 of them I have, each of them about that thick. I have a stack of my own 3 passports over a 30-year period that are like books of travel study. And you can see all these nations. Now, thank God, in fact, they stopped adding passports to the pages to the American passport. You have to get a whole new passport. But the good thing is the nations are starting not to put the whole sheet in there, but just stamp more and more. That means on one page you can fit as many as 8 or 9 entrances and exits into nations, which is great. They find a little clear spot and they print that. We, of course, are moving to a digital economy of travel, where our passports will be digitized and the visas will be electronic, and that is entirely how it will work. But the rules of the acquisition of said visas will still be the same. The visa basically has the length of time that you may be in that country, as we see here. So that length of time that you can be in the country will be indicated on this document, on this visa, and it'll say 30 days, it'll say 90 days, it'll say 7 days. Sometimes different fees apply to different lengths of days. You can get a 10-day or a 30-day or a 90-day, a 6 month or a year. I, by God's grace, got a 10-year multiple entry passport stamp or visa, a business visa to India while we worked there. And that was a wonderful gift from God, which was miraculous in its acquisition, supernatural. And I was so glad I had it because I could go in and out of India all I wanted without any fear. And I had a privilege to go there. Right now for Singapore, I have that. I have multiple entry passage under my employment pass, which is just another form of visa, which in my passport, the information is marked in there for me to easily go in and out of Singapore as much as I want to, as often as I want to, whenever I want to. I can leave today and come back tomorrow and leave tomorrow again. I can go to a nation every single day. If I take the bus, I could go to Malaysia every day. If I take a boat, I could go to Indonesia every day because that's how close the nations are. It doesn't affect my passport at all, nor does it affect the visas because both of those nations give you a visa on arrival now. They will keep stamping my passport, however, but soon that won't be necessary either. They will just keep you in a computer record. And so things are changing as years go by, but you need to find this out before you go into another nation. Ask, do I need a visa? You can Google that, by the way. Just go online and read. So you can apply through mail very often, or go directly to consulates of the nation in your home country. For instance, if you want to go to India, you could go to the consulate of India. The nearest one to me when I lived in the U.S. at the time was the consulate in Houston. And I would drive over to Houston, Texas, which was not that far. We would leave early in the morning, go over and wait in line there, make our application, and we could get even same-day service if we made an appointment. We did that for our initial Indian visas. Then we got the extension for the multiple entry business visa when we actually lived there. So these are things that you can do to get them. Now, you should always pray for this because there are issues. They don't always just give you. For instance, I'll give you an example. I have had it in my heart to go to China for years, but I have made 2 applications for visas to China, and both of them have been turned down. So right now, the government of China refuses to allow me to go. Now, one of the reasons for this is probably that they did a little bit of research into me when they were reviewing my application and could see clearly online, as it is very visible, that I have been preaching the gospel for many years and do so constantly. China does not want the gospel preached in their nation. There are churches there. There are believers by the thousands. But right now, as there has been this kind of a freedom over the last decade or so, the population of believers has grown, but now the restraint is coming back again. They're cracking down on these churches, and the persecution is rising again. So we need to always pray. So as a result of that, it's not easy for me to get a visa to China. My wife got a visa to China, but then again, my wife is not constantly preaching online. So she is not evidently a pastor, so it was less likely they could detect that. But with me, they could. I'm not giving up. I still want to go because I would love to go to China. But whenever you're getting these, whenever you're applying for them, you need to really pray and ask for God's favor. It should be covered in prayer. Sometimes visas are refused and you must be patient. I have to say this here, expediters are a good idea, especially to those resistant visa countries. In other words, countries where it's harder to get. And you can find this out by asking online, by looking at blogs and also other information online. They will tell you, especially the expats that have gone in and out of those countries, they will inform you if it's difficult to make it into that nation or another nation. And then you can use an expediter. An expediter is a group of people who work full-time for you to mail your passport to them. They have an office in a hub city like Houston or New York or Los Angeles or Chicago, and the US anyway, and you mail your passport to that expediter. There are expediters here in Singapore if you need special permits, but Singaporeans practically do not ever need any kind of special anything because, as I've already said, their passports are like gold for a missionary. They're the perfect passport. But most other nations, in Australia, in the UK, you have these expediters who will process it for you. Now, this is the benefit of an expediter. It costs extra money, first of all. And if you want same-day service, they can make it happen, but it's going to cost you as much as $100 more than you would pay without an expediter. You think, well, why would I want that? Well, for different reasons. If your trip is soon and you need to have the visa within the time frame, or if you think it's going to be hard and they might resist you because they are far more likely to approve visas applied through an expediter than they are for anyone else. And I'll tell you why. Remember, we were talking about the bribe earlier. Well, it just so happens expediters pay a service fee. That's part of the extra money you pay the expediter, is they pay a service fee to the people who process these passports and the visas in them in these consulates or in these embassies. So that money of service, it goes often into pockets of officials who make these choices. So it is another form of taxation, if you would, a fee, whatever you want to call it. Bribe, whatever. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Whatever you call it, I don't care if it makes it work. Expediters work on that principle. I'll give you an example. One time I was standing in a queue or a line of about 10 people at this window waiting to submit an application for my visa. I had already been waiting there the whole morning, and then finally I had the chance. I had to wait, and each person was taking about 15 minutes. 10 more people. We're talking hours, and it's so exhausting. And I was waiting little by little. Sometimes when we would go do these things, it would take the entire day. And this is when I learned about expediters. A man came in. He had a briefcase. And he went straight past everybody waiting in the line. He didn't take a number. He didn't do anything but went straight to the window, whereby the man behind the glass, drinking his tea back there, looked through and saw him through the glass and smiled at him and waved. And he told the people in line, move over, move over. They moved over. And this man put his briefcase up on the counter there where the little window was passing, where they work in this teller at the embassy. He opened up his briefcase and he slid under there like maybe I'm not kidding, 35, 40 passports, all American passports, U.S. passports. And they had rubber bands around them. He took them, and then he took this envelope, which was shaped identical to the monetary note size of American money. It looked obviously an envelope full of cash, and he slid it in there. And that man took that and looked around, and it went somewhere under the counter. And he says, okay, I'll take care of these. Come back in 1 hour. Now, we're waiting in the line. That man takes these. He starts hollering at clerks and people in the office. And they start stamping and preparing all those 35 or 40 passports for immediate processing. And they got it all done. And it caused us in the line to have to wait another half an hour to an hour for that to be finished. Then the man come back, wiping his face, had a lunch break, picked up all the passports and left. And I thought about that. How much scrutiny went on concerning those passports and whether or not they should put visas? I don't think there was any. I think based upon the fact that they were getting a special service fee for doing it and doing it quickly, they just did it and didn't ask questions. So now you see the wisdom of an expediter. An expediter is able to circumvent some of the obstacles that are usually there. Yes, it costs a little more, but there are cases I think it is necessary. So all this concerning visas, and God can do miracles in these realms, by the way, where in fact sometimes we don't know everything that's happening. When we went to India the first time and we set up there, and we had planned on, we were there for 6 years when we went in, and during that time we moved in, and I had my 10-year multiple entry visa for business, so it was in my passport, and I had this idea that, okay, well, that's all I need. For 10 years, I'm fine. Well, what I didn't know is that you had to register with the Labor Department and the government and the police in wherever you would be staying within a certain amount of time before, and it was within the first 2 weeks. It was like 15 days. And I did not know this. Actually, I should have known it because it was written in very tiny print in the actual document of the 10-year visa that was embedded in my passport. And it just so happened that after we were in India, finally got our place set up, and I was kind of chilling, and it was about 2 weeks into our stay, that I had this feeling, I don't know, this gnawing feeling in my heart, like something's not right. Something's wrong. I don't know what's going on. So I went and located my passport. I just felt, is this something with my papers? And I was reading through it and looking, and I looked at that visa. I said, no, this visa is valid from now for 10 years. Then I said, what's this small print? And I read it. And the small print stated that upon entry into India, the bearer of this visa is required to go and register with the Labor Department and with the police within 15 days of your entrance at penalty of law and imprisonment if you don't do so. Well, guess what? It was the 15th day. And that's why the Holy Spirit brought my attention to it. I panicked. I got up immediately, got in touch with someone to try to help me. I called some pastors, and those pastors, they didn't want anything to do with me because they were afraid that somehow the law was going to come down on me and they would be inculcated or caught up in this crime. Maybe they would be aiding and abetting a criminal, whatever. They abandoned me, and they're just like, we'll pray for you. Well, thanks. And nobody was there to help except for Myra Fernandez. And Myra did help, and she went with me and got all the papers together, and she paced in prayer and intercession outside the government office while we were waiting in there, and we didn't have all the papers we needed. When I brought the file for the registration and I was in there, they would go down this list of the things I needed, like 15 items on this list, and something would be missing. And I wouldn't have that. And they would say, no, you need to go get this. And I would run off sweating and nervous and make a copy of this and do that. And then I would have to run off and have an affidavit made by a certified public accountant and bring that back. And then they would go to the list and they'd find another thing. What about this? Where is this? You don't have this. And they would yell at me and scold me. And then I would go out. And this went on for hours, all day. Hour after hour after hour. And Myra stood there with me and said, okay, we'll go here, we'll go there. She helped me. And it was exhausting. I'm sure when Myra's hearing this, she's remembering the stress of that moment. And still it wasn't done. The whole day went by. And now we're going into the 16th day, past the 2 weeks. And I'm just envisioning my family in prison and me in jail. You know, I'm envisioning the shackles. And oh my gosh, I could not imagine what it would be like to be in an Indian jail. I can't eat, I can't drink, my stomach is hurting, I'm petrified. And I'm sitting in this office and we are just praying and begging God for mercy. Lord, please, please, what do we do? And I had one more document to finish. And I asked, and they said, it was already, they were mad at me. They looked at their watches and said, we're closing, come back tomorrow. And I said, I can't come back tomorrow. They didn't care. They didn't care. They were just ready to close. And I said, well, I need this one more. And the lady got mad and she said, look, just write something, write anything. And I quickly hand wrote something, very quickly. She said, just sign the bottom, sign it. She stamped it and she stuck it in. And she said, okay. She said, but it still is pending approval. And nobody wanted to approve it in the office because they all felt like it's sketchy. And so they refused. And they're kind of lazing around. It's the end of the day. They already put it. I was like the last person inside this government office. Myra's standing outside nervously waiting. And finally, at that moment, Myra's praying, I'm praying, we're all praying. This man comes in. When he bursts in the door, he has a full uniform on with badges and stars and titles. And, you know, he's obviously like the general of this department. And everybody, when they see him, sir, 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 and they're bowing and pretending like they're busy. You know, you knew he was the big boss. And he walked around and checked everybody's work. He checked this, checked that. He come to me, he looked at me, he looked at them, he asked a couple of people about me. And they kind of told him and they showed him the file. And he came over and he sat across from me at the desk where I was. And he sat down and he looked at me and he says, so, I'm looking at your file. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, tell me, why do you want to be in India? And he said it. And I knew it was a test, like, what are you doing? We don't trust you. And the enemy forces, of course, in the spirit world, they were there against me. But this man was the kingpin. He's the one, I could tell, he was the one with the authority to make or break me. And I didn't know what to say. I thought about the scripture. It says, in that moment I will put the words in your mouth to speak. And you don't have to take thought. Well, I had no thought of what I was going to say, but I breathed in and I breathed out. And as I did, I went on this amazing rant, a speech about how I was sent. Now, understand, for us to get the visa to begin with, we had to create a company called JC Imports. Yeah, JC Imports, which was an import-export consultancy firm. By the way, a legal company. We had our tax number. We set up our office in the United States, which happened to be the top shelf in a barber shop in Luling, Louisiana. That was simply an answering machine with a contracted phone line for $12 a month, which means we had a number. Anybody that called that number would get a recording of my wife saying, welcome to JC Imports. There's no one in at the moment and all our representatives are busy. If you please leave a message, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And had music and it's a cute little message. That was it. That was the sum total of our infrastructure. And we put it there. That's the number they called in the process where they did hear and did leave a message, but it verified to them that JC Imports was a real company. So we got the visa based upon that. But now after all that, we're in that moment waiting there. And the commandant says, why do you want to come there? And I said to him, well, I'm here. I want to represent the interests of the United States concerning relationships with the people in the nation of India so that amicable formations of social interactions can take place so that we will be able to help the understanding of the commerce, the ebb and flow of import and export in a consultancy realm. And I just was rambling on about all this crazy stuff and I didn't even know. It wasn't prepared. It just came out. But it was beautiful. It was eloquent. It was perfect. It's like I was running for a public office. You know that babble that people speak. It's just a bunch of words. It just came out. The man was so impressed. He looked at everyone. He said, why? He said, why are you stopping this man? This man wants to bless India. And he said, welcome to India. And he stamped all of our stuff at the last minute and shook our hands. And I got up and I thought I was going to pass out. And I said, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And that's how it was done. I'm telling you, these issues, people want to know about how can you spoil the goods in the strong man's house if you don't first bind the strong man. I'll tell you, the strong man, I've met him through the years. He works in government offices. He's in control of documents and visas. He works for the police department and the tax department in the nations where you're going to work. And if he is not properly taken care of, if you don't bind the strong man, you're never going to make it. Visas are a big part of that. And I've seen God do miracles, not just for me, but also people with me. Another one is airplane tickets. Very important. This is usually the most expensive part of your mission travel. Some tickets can be thousands of dollars. Of course, they can be. For me and my family, the travel in and out of the United States, we're looking right now with this, just the family of 3 of us, round trip is somewhere around $6,000. Very expensive to do that. A minimum would be $5,000. It's usually anywhere between $4,800 to $6,500, depending on seasons. Back when I had the boys, and there were 4 of us plus the baby, and there was a moment, the most expensive of our time, because we had 3 children, and we didn't even travel to the U.S. In fact, there was a season of 6 straight years that we did not return to the United States of America because it was just $12,000 to go. It was just crazy, and I felt like it was such a waste because that money could be used on the mission field. So airline tickets, they're expensive. Be sure to get a round trip ticket that does not have a large penalty for moving the return date in case of something requiring you to leave early. In other words, there are different kinds of tickets. You know this from traveling. Round trip, but there's also one way. Now, sometimes, mysteriously, have no explanation of why, sometimes a round trip ticket is cheaper than a one-way ticket. Don't know why, but I have seen that. Not commonly, but it does happen. Usually, though, a round trip ticket costs about 25% more than a one-way ticket. So it's not an equal price there and back, but it has something to do with the circle. I think it's so that airlines can govern. They make it, there's a greater incentive for you to have a round trip ticket. If you pay for a special part of that ticket, then it enables you to cancel at any time without an extra fee, or to cancel for a small amount of money. Some tickets, the cheapest, best deals, are locked into the date and you can't move it at all. And if you try to move it at all, you lose the ticket entirely and lose your money. So you have to know all these things when you're buying the ticket. Now I'll tell you some other things interesting about tickets. Some nations that you go to, if you are flying, for instance, from the United States, let's say you're going to leave from Houston Airport and you are flying to Singapore, if you have a one-way ticket, and I know this from experience, by the way, if you have a one-way ticket to that nation, to Singapore, and you at the time do not have a business visa or an employment pass already secured, and you plan on being there on a tourist visa, which, by the way, you can do as an American for 3 months, 90 days, you can be in Singapore by law. And so therefore, if you do not have a return ticket within the 90-day space, let's say you're just saying by faith, I'm just going to get the one-way ticket because I know once I'm there, I can make application and everything will be fine. Well, that's not enough for the airlines. The airlines will want to see that return ticket. One time I didn't know this. So I go to the airport, all of our goods, they dropped us off in Houston, they drove back to New Orleans, we're there, and the counter at Singapore Airlines when we're checking in says, "Where's your return ticket?" Huh? And I said, "I don't have a return ticket." "Well, we cannot allow you to board the plane if you do not have a return ticket. Show me your work visa." Well, at the time we didn't have a work visa because we were going to get it processed. And I said, I don't have that yet. I'm getting that when I'm there, we'll get that. And they said, it's not good enough. You have to show proof of return within the 90-day period that you will be allotted a visa. And we cannot allow you to board that unless you have proof of it. And now I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is just a few hours before the flight leaves. What do I do? And I tell you what I had to do. I had to in a petrified way, quickly go off to a phone, call an agent from Singapore Airlines, and book a ticket for return on dates. But what I did was I booked a ticket that could be canceled without a penalty. And I got the tickets from my whole family to return to the United States from Singapore about a month, 30 days after our arrival there. And when I got that ticket all done and it was registered and done, I gave them, in fact, the fax number, or they sent it via the email, and I was able to get it at the counter of Singapore Airlines in Houston. And they printed it out and they received it, made copies, and said, okay, now you can board the flight. And it cost me thousands of dollars. Thank God I had room on a credit card to do it. I maxed out the credit card. Plus that, it held up the money for a couple of weeks until finally the airline, I called, as soon as I arrived in Singapore, I called the airline and canceled the ticket, and they refunded the money. But it took about 2 weeks for them to do that, whereby I was nervous that I had acquired somewhere in excess of $10,000 in debt for these return tickets. Make a long story short, yes, I got the money back, and yes, we did get the employment pass and no longer needed to show those tickets. So then we could buy one-way tickets all we wanted. But we stopped because we started buying round-trip tickets from Singapore to the US, because this became our home as we go and come back. But man, there are some circuses you get caught in working out all these details, and it is your responsibility. Nobody's going to do this for you. Very important that you understand this. Try to get your tickets as far in advance as possible. Another rule of tickets is that the earlier you get them, the cheaper they are. If you know you're going to travel to another nation, usually if you get them as much as a year in advance, 6 months is good. But if you can get it even more than that, and you're booking tickets to the next year, you may find some amazing deals. However, sometimes it works the other way around, and that if you wait and try booking later, you'll get a cheaper ticket. Can't always tell. But make sure you understand, now every year that goes by, the amount of baggage you can carry is dropping dramatically. Less and less and less. On my last flight, in fact, I just didn't think in my head. I thought for sure that my baggage would be X amount of dollars and this is what it cost, because I've always been able to get, well, I didn't realize they had lessened my amount on when I was returning, and I was just like 7-8 pounds over my weight. They wouldn't accept it. But the thing, I absolutely couldn't throw my things away. I had to pay $150 for about 8 extra pounds, and I felt so stupid and so bad. So you got to pay very close attention to these details on the tickets and make sure you do the right thing. Be very careful. Now, in some cases, I've helped missionaries actually use ferry boat tickets to prove they were leaving Singapore, when they in fact were getting one-way tickets. The Mexicans did this, one-way tickets into Singapore. And then after that, they needed to show proof that they would be leaving, because the Mexicans in that day would only get 30-day visas. They could renew their visas, but it was kind of sketchy and hard to do. And because some of them were coming to our program to study, I knew that we would have 3 months of program, and they would only need to go out and come back 2 times based upon 30-day visas. And so technically they were supposed to come in for 30 days and leave for 30 days, and then they could come back again for 30 days. But the questions were not always asked. So when they come in, they were very poor. They made it here. I knew they were not going to do anything illegal. They were studying with me and spent all their time in the core, same hours, but in the classroom itself. So they would come, and one of the ways that we helped them to get back out was to provide them with a ferry boat ticket that showed they were going to Indonesia within the 30 days of their ticket in. And the airlines accepted it because they could show a ticket. I don't even, they noticed that it was ferry boat. It prints out like an itinerary for an airline, but it still is a valid form of transportation leaving the nation. So we stayed within the law. But it takes a lot of effort, and there's always stress surrounding it and all these issues. This is the strong man. I forget about the demons. Forget about witchcraft. Forget about all the other stuff. You want to meet the enemy, he's going to work through this realm. So you have to be prepared for anything. Special permits. Now this is a whole nother thing. Some regions of certain countries require special permits that you must obtain apart from your visa. In other words, you go to a country, some areas of Malaysia, for instance, and you decide while you're there that you would like to go on a trip into another region. Sometimes there are isolated regions inside of a given nation. Although you have a passport, you will need a special permit to go to that village. I have had opportunities to do things that I could not do because I did not have those special permits. If I had known beforehand that that area was restricted, I could have made application for that special permit. That too, my fault. I need to know these things, and you need to study to find out. So all of this goes together. Now I want to talk about this fifth thing here, the conduct of the missionary during travel. I recommend that you carefully listen to this. When you travel, there is a certain code of conduct that you should adhere to. I would say these things in a list. Number one, dress right. I'm telling you, if you dress a certain way, you will have favor no matter what. I know when you go travel, you have these long flights. Believe me, I know when we take flights in and out of Singapore, sometimes those flights are 30 hours long. 30 hours. There are flights where you are in the airplane for 17 hours, 16 hours. Now they have the A380 and some of these other big long distance carriers. They will fly from Singapore straight to Houston, and it is a super long flight. I've taken those long flights, and you want to be comfortable, I know. And so you have a tendency to want to wear your flip-flops and your sweatpants and the t-shirt, but I'm telling you that the more down dressed you are, the more down your respect will be from the people surrounding you. Government agents, airlines, everybody you're talking to, immigration officials. Your look, the way you dress is very important. And I have found this. I get special travel clothes, which are usually black polos, like you always see me wearing here at the Corps. I wear a black polo, black trousers, which are golf pants that are amazing. They look like dress slacks, but I can literally shower with them on with soap and rinse them and hang them on the shower curtain, and they will dry within an hour. That's why I bought them. These are the perfect. My shirts are the same way, all dry fit. I can be totally black, and then I get one simple black blazer and put it on top. It looks like, man, when I have the black on black with that black blazer and my black sunglasses, I look like George Clooney walking to that airport. And I can't tell you, because I dress nice and it is an image, how many times I have gotten favor. You can ask my wife. Sometimes she's amazed. Why would they do that for you? I've been taken out of long lines of people waiting to get through immigration, and I don't have any difference than them. The only thing different is the way I'm dressed. And I've been, sir, come here, and I think I'm in trouble. And they bring me on the side and bring me through as if I'm first class. Why? Because they think I must be first class if I look that good. I say, travel economy, dress for first class. Dress right, look good. Try to, and it'll give you advantages. I'm telling you, it works. Another one there is act right. What does that mean? Always be respectful. Be very careful about your attitude toward immigration people. We had a missionary that came here years back, and they were coming from Central America. And by the way, of all our missionaries we've had here, we have had a bunch of issues because they come from different countries. Some of them have battled their visa issues and have battled the ability to stay in, but some, almost none of them have we lost except for one. There was one of all these years that have done 25 years in the one Central American girl was denied re-entry into Singapore and was held in detention and deported on a plane and thrown out of the country. One. And I'm going to tell you my opinion about what happened. Because we were on the outside waiting, talking in immigration and hoping, but they didn't let her through. However, during the program, there was an instance I had where I've always found that all of my students were very, very much submitted to me as a spiritual authority, and we've talked about that. They were very respectful of me. But I noticed with this girl, it was a little different. Often she would, as we say in America, bow up on me. Like, get in my face and argue with me. And a lot of times she lacked respect, and she had a hot head. She would get angry. And when she would get angry, she'd just protest. Well, that's what happened in immigration. Because when you come through immigration, sometimes they are forceful. What they're trying to do is see if you're doing anything, sometimes with young women especially. One of the reasons is, and I don't mean to insult young women, but they think they might possibly could be prostitutes. Because a lot of prostitutes travel that way into nations, connect with some men, and just live in their houses and break laws. And prostitution to begin with, being illegal, as this is another form of sex trafficking. So they ask questions abruptly. Where are you, how much, this, that. They will look in your phone. They want to see your messages. They want to ask who. They will call me. I give my number. They will call me. All these things. And this young woman was questioned that way, and she got angry, and she got upset. Now, when her anger rose and she protested, that, of course, caused deeper problems. And they're the government. They are the customs officials. They are immigration. They decide. And they don't care. If you get angry, they just lock you up. You're a foreigner. You have no rights again in that country where you're traveling because you're coming from somewhere else. And sure enough, they detained her. They put her in a back office. One thing led to another. They did not let her in. And I'm convinced it was because she didn't act right. And she got angry. Whereas I know other missionaries, one particular missionary from Mexico that came in and out of Singapore, and they tried to stop her a dozen times. But because she was always so respectful, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'm so sorry. She always maintained her cool. Brilliant young woman named Johanna. She always had her cool in her head. Always. It might have taken an hour, maybe even 2 hours, but inevitably they would say, okay, you can come in. And they would let her in because she acted right. And if you have pride, that's one of the things that will stop you. So dress right, act right, hide your money. I have noticed a tendency to people when they're traveling, sometimes they have this large sum of cash and they just flipping it around. That's a stupid thing to do. Hide your money. Even I've learned this all over when you're traveling, not just in the airports, but outside the airports, especially in cities. When you go to an ATM, you are a target. Everybody's watching you go in the ATM booth and they're watching you come out. If a thief is casing you, they stand outside, they watch foreigners, and they watch you go in that ATM booth and they look for what you're doing to determine whether or not they can think that you would be a good mark for them to try to steal from. So I'm going to tell you what I have done for 35 years, and it has always worked, and I've never had an issue. It's an act. I go into the ATM where I'm going to get money out. I have my card with me. I walk into the ATM. I walk very close to the ATM with my stomach touching the place where the money comes out. I put the card in, hiding. I put my number in. I get my amount of cash, and then the cash comes out. And without moving, I carefully move the money. I fold it in my stomach where no one can see it. I stick it down in my belt, inside my pants, and then I relax. And I take the card, and I look at the card, and I back up angry, and I bang the card. I blow on the card, and I stick it back in the machine, and I put my hands on my head. And I act angry, and I look around with a disgusted face. I hit the machine, angry, stupid machine. I take my card out, and I walk out as if I got nothing. Well, what does it tell you? It tells you, if you're a thief watching, don't bother robbing this guy. He didn't even get any money out of the ATM. For 35 years I've done that, and I think it has saved me a few times because, believe me, I've had some shady-looking characters around me before. Hide your money. Travel light. Gosh, people travel such heavy bags and so much junk going to these places that for 3 days they have this huge suitcase. I can go for a week-long seminar teaching 10 hours a day, and my goods fit within a backpack that fits on my back comfortably, no problem, because of the aforementioned dry fit clothes and all these lighter garments that I make sure that I buy. My wardrobe, I have 8 pairs of identical pants that are all the same. I have a wardrobe. I will wear those pants for the rest of my life. I have no desire to have any other pants. Organize your documents, I say. Yeah, put your documents in order. I've been at the airport before arrive and somebody, a missionary, flipping around through their papers, and look at me checking in at the airport and say, "You have my passport?" Like, why in the world would I have your passport? Are you crazy? It's your passport. Be responsible. Always know where your passport is. Get a special folder with a zipper where all your documents fit in there. It's always zipped up tight. Never leave them laying around. Put everything carefully together, every document, every ticket, all the information that you need. Have it in there with your passport and keep it zip closed, and then keep it buried inside of your bag that stays somewhere. Or if you have a safe in your room, put it in the safe and lock it by a code number. Whatever. Organize your documents very carefully. Be careful in that regard. And finally, find the gate at the airport. I stopped with this one. Find the gate. Mission number 1 in an airport. Find the gate. I'm going to tell you again. Find the gate. Find the gate. You say, what are you talking about? I'm saying that I have come so close to missing flights, and I give myself a huge buffer, which is another hint, by the way. If they tell you you need 2 hours to go to you need to arrive at the airport 2 hours before your flight, then go 3 hours before. It'd be better that you sit in there at the gate for an extra hour, sipping your Starbucks coffee, than nervously biting your nails at the TSA or at the inspection where they're the security checks and they're making you pull your hair out and you're checking your underwear size and all that stuff. If you show up late, it's your fault. And the airlines, so you need to get there early. And another thing that's important of that is finding the gate, because the gate is not always where you think it would be. I've been in airports where it says gate 12 and you know you need to go to gate 17. So by logic, where is that? It's just 5 gates away. You can look down the corridor. It's not always like that. Sometimes it only goes to gate 15 and it turns out gate 17 is in another terminal. And the only way to get there is by a rail system that is not at the end of the terminal where it logically should be, so you could go right to gate 17. You have to go all the way back, go to the terminal, go to the 3rd floor, get in the SkyTrain, go over to the other terminal, go back down. We're talking about a 20-minute adventure. And you saw that you thought you knew where your gate was. No, never assume. Find the gate. Stand at the gate. Touch the number with your hand. Look at it on your ticket or your boarding pass. Look at the gate and confirm it. Go up and ask somebody, are you sure is this the right place? They'll say yes, yes. Then you know. And by the way, even after that, check that monitor regularly, because they change gates the last minute. The gate, the gate, the gate. Find the gate. Priority number 1, and you will do well in your traveling. I can't tell you how many times I've been frustrated because of that issue. But we're going to do well. We're going to travel to the nations. We're going to make it to these countries without any hindrances or problems, because we will dress right, act right, hide our money, travel light, organize our documents perfectly. Won't ask somebody, you have my passport, you have my Never give your passport, not your bag. Even airports say never let your bag out of your own press. It's true. Don't leave your bag with somebody. Say, can you watch my bag? Don't do that. Be responsible with your own stuff. Find the gate at the airport, and God will be able to bring you to your destination so you can preach the gospel in all the nations. We're going to stop here for now, but I look forward to being with you again soon as we continue this subject.